Special moves in fighting games are an indispensable building block in the foundation of what makes people love the genre. They're the brushstrokes that allow players to freely express themselves in a game physically, and the means for developers to breathe life into new ideas never seen in gaming before. Their importance can't be overstated in fighting games, and if we're going to discuss special moves, we obviously have to talk about motion inputs as well. They come hand in hand, and there's not much we can do to separate them. In fact, they might be even more intertwined than you realize. Let me explain.
You son of a bitch!
If I want to tell someone how to perform a Kamehameha in DBFZ, I'd probably say do the fireball motion and press the special button. If they've played Street Fighter specifically, I'd probably say just Hadouken. Thinking like this is how we as humans work, relating information back to what we've learned in the past, and it contextualizes the new stuff to help it stick. Things have evolved so far that a DP motion from Street Fighter 2 is famous in other media for being difficult, as well as describing moves that don't even use the motion itself. DP used to refer to moves that have good anti-air properties and probably some form of invincibility. Using that definition, some DPs don't really look like DPs anymore. Hell, the letters stand for Dragon Punch. Like, how is this a Dragon Punch? Because of its revolutionary properties from Street Fighter 2, it's become a staple in the fighting game vocabulary and represents some ideas that look nothing like the original form. But there's one type of special move I've noticed that doesn't fit this mold. There's no easy denomination that everyone will understand, and I'm curious as to why that is. There doesn't even seem to be a normal means of describing these types of moves, just a general fighting game mechanic that happens to align with the input. And the input I'm talking about is negative edge.
I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
Negative edge refers to the act of releasing a button to perform a special move instead of pressing it. Many fighting games have this mechanic built in to help with certain inputs and allow for more leniency on tight special cancel windows. It's also a tool some players use to help with hit confirms, as they only need to release the button they already pressed instead of press it again. And this is according to the Fighting Game Glossary by Infill, which goes on to say, you might hear the term used to talk specifically about specials that only activate on a button release, like Cody's Zonk Knuckle.
Bingo! You are fighting way out of your league.
Zonk Knuckle is a special move introduced to Cody's moveset in Street Fighter 4. It's got armor breaking properties, does massive stun and combos, and even has partial invincibility, with full invincibility in the EX version. Reading this aloud, it sounds pretty insane, and it seems like there's not even a downside to such a move. Well, that's because of the input it's balanced around. In order to perform Zonk Knuckle, the player has to hold down a punch button for at least 1 second. That means you lose access to a punch button and whatever extras come with it, like throws or focus attack, depending on the button that you hold. Balancing a powerful move on restricting the player is an interesting trade-off that allows for these negative edge special moves to have some crazy properties. It's one of those things where we're forced to ask ourselves, is it really that difficult or worth it at the end of the day? Because when players get good at something, they can really abuse it. Zonk's implementation in Street Fighter V was less egregious on paper than its Street Fighter 4 predecessor, but in practice, those Cody players were really up to no good.
Now. Oh, he didn't have the charge. They got the level 2 for the wall bounce. My goodness, just outside the range, and yeah, that EX Zonk level 2 hurts so much.
This version was Mega Plus on block, could grant extra juggles, and wall bounce on hit if you charged it for 5 seconds. It looks hard at first, but really it just takes a bit of getting used to, and in my opinion, it made Cody one of the most unique, high-tier characters at the end of Street Fighter V. In fact, the implementation of negative edge was all over the place in Street Fighter V, and I applaud Capcom for not being afraid to try different things with negative edge in a modern fighter. For example, false fireballs required the player to hold the punch button before they could shoot a projectile, and there was a visual indicator showing exactly when it was ready to go off, which I haven't really seen before in a fighting game. Or Manat's V-Trigger 1. Probably the most complicated V-Trigger in the game. To release her orbs, the player would have to hold the corresponding button for a few frames and then let go. The time you had to hold it was very short, but I still think it was a great way to apply this mechanic. And that brings us to maybe the most infamous version of a negative edge special in Street Fighter V. I don't think I even need to say anything for this one, cause it speaks for itself.
Oh no.
Yeah. Balrog's turnaround punch, or tap, is the other flagship name for negative edge special moves in fighting games. This is what I called those moves from back in the SF4 days when I was getting into Street Fighter, and it was implemented way back in Street Fighter 2 Balrog's design. It's got similar usage to Zonk, but in Street Fighter V it was mainly used to avoid throws and sometimes catch jumping opponents off guard thanks to its upper body invincibility. What makes tap so unique is that it doesn't cap off at level 3 like Zonk does in only 5 seconds. Instead, you can hold tap for 60 seconds for 10 levels of different damage value. In my opinion, it's one of the hypest things you can ever see in a match, as it means this person was holding buttons for a full minute just waiting for the right time to smack you with everything they've got. It's a unique strategy to give a character, especially one known for fighting dirty. 10 out of 10, no notes. Good job.
Balrog's mine. Oh my god! What level was that?
So while Balrog is the earliest example of one of these specials, there's actually not many others from that time. Pretty much every game ran with the concept of DPs and fireballs, making those motions and names prevalent, but almost nobody touched the turnaround punch. Tons of games wanted to copy the success of Street Fighter 2 and took the game/move balance in all sorts of wacky directions. Revenge of Karnov, a game known for its wild inputs and insane move properties, doesn't even have a single negative edge special move. This truly goes to show you just how innovative something like this actually is. But there was one studio brave enough to take on this challenge a short time after Street Fighter 2 did, and that's SNK. In 1996, Samurai Showdown Amakusa's Revenge was released and featured a character by the name of Shizumaru. He's got a pretty standard toolkit overall, including a fireball, a dragon punch, and even a move that can reflect projectiles. Already, he's a pretty dope character to have since you've got most of your bases covered. But on top of all that, he's got Crazy Downpour, which might be the most famous part of his toolkit. At this point, you can probably guess that Crazy Downpour works like tap in that you can hold the button for 1 to 10 seconds for decent damage, or 10 seconds or more for a big burst of damage. I'll leave this mention here because it's honestly pretty basic, but I really hope we get that rollback in Sam's show soon because this game did not deserve to go out the way it did.
No. Ooh, uses an anti-air. Oh my god, that does so much damage! What? What is this? This guy has been playing the entire round without A. I know he's charging with A.
So while Sam's show has us looking to the past, let's look at an example to help us look to the future. In 1999, SNK released Garo Mark of the Wolves. I hadn't tried this game until recently, and for those of you who haven't played Garo, I want to walk you through my experience booting this game up for the first time. I knew next to nothing about this game before jumping in, but after seeing this, how could I not pick this character? Well, to my surprise, after looking at his moveset, I noticed that he also has a negative edge special. He's actually got two. In seeing them, I tried to figure out what to refer to them as. Were they more like Tap or were they closer to Zonk? After messing with them, they're not really comparable to Tap or Zonk. But's negative edge moves are good combo enders, although particularly difficult to use as such. They don't skip neutral much, but they can travel far, and it's possible to space them well to be hard to punish. I'm no Garo expert, but I will say I love the twist that he adds to the movesets of the classic Art of Fighting characters. I can't wait to see this character's return and implementation in City of Wolves coming up soon. And while I'm talking about SNK characters coming back, there's just one last character I need in KOF 15 to make my perfect dream team. Raiden's been around for a while, but his most infamous iterations appear in Capcom vs SNK 2 and KOF 13. He's a burly wrestler who's not afraid to win by any means necessary, as he boasts moves like Poison Breath, in which he spits in the opponent's face. He's got this in common with Balrog on top of a turnaround punch style technique. In Raiden's case, he's got the Super Drop Kick, which is like tap on steroids. Super Drop Kick has 4 levels where the player can hold the button for 24 in-game seconds, which is more like 40 real-time seconds. And that's a hell of a long time in a game as fast-paced and chaotic as KOF. It's different from tap in that it combos into pretty much anything and leaves the opponent in the juggle state, allowing for adept players to loop combos for what seems like forever, as long as they have the skill to keep it up.
God, thank the Lord. Thank the heavens. Thank the heavens.
The most beautiful thing about this move, though, is that in early versions of KOF 13, the drop kick was fully invincible, destroyed guard meter, and had 2 frames of startup. And it still kept its juggle properties. Players would pretty much just spam it, as there wasn't much to lose by using it, aside from the restrictions of holding the buttons. So once again, I can't wait for this guy to show up in KOF 15. But finding this example from the past made me ask more questions. Why haven't we seen more examples of this in later games from these franchises? There could be some crazy implications of negative edge techniques in other parts of the genre than the footsie-based fighters of Street Fighter and Sam Show, right? Like, for example, what would a Zonk look like in a 3D fighter? These games work pretty differently overall, so the rules around a negative edge input would be altered. And that's where Hilda comes in.
Hilda.
My people are behind me. I cannot lose.
Like Bud, she's got 2 means of charging up her special attacks. A controls her horizontal sword strikes, and B controls the vertical spear attacks. Holding down these buttons after using them triggers a special move that can only be done with negative edge. As you land these special moves, Hilda gains special properties on her A and B buttons while also enhancing those same specials, which is indicated by the red and blue glow on her sword and spear respectively. I'm grossly oversimplifying this character, by the way, as she's actually pretty complicated to break down, but for the purposes of this video, she's actually what I find to be the most compelling version of negative edge implemented into a character's toolkit. But what's so interesting about this whole thing is that when Soul Calibur players refer to these types of special moves for Hilda, they're not referred to as tap or zonk, or even negative edge moves. They're referred to as charge moves.
Nice. Alright, the charge A. Very nice. Now you got you had Sword Regalia, but use it for damage, which was a lot.
And while that makes total sense, it's an interesting difference between the language of 2D fighters and 3D ones, because charge moves in 2D games obviously carry a whole different meaning. The deeper I dive into this topic, the muddier the meaning of these special moves becomes. A fireball in a 3D fighter is still called a fireball, and so is the motion input. The same applies for DPs as well, but when we get to negative edge, the moves just can't be named in any universal way, and I think there's one last piece of the puzzle we need to figure out why that is.
Oh my god! Oh my
Let's go!
Oh, the comeback!
So you have 200 IQ, I got 202. Let's go.
In classic video essay style, I've noticed through the research that there's 3 different types of techniques that seem to apply to negative edge special moves. There's the turnaround punch, a big strike that levels up in correlation to how long a button is held, and then there's the charge move, which applies to moves like Hilda's, where you hold a button to activate some kind of effect that either enhances your character or moves you do later in the combo. For a 2-dimensional example, we have Bazit from Fate Unlimited Codes. And yeah, I'm digging deep. I'm trying to hit every single example in this video so none of y'all have ammo against me in the comments later. I know I'm gonna miss some, but go easy on me. I'm trying my best. Charge characters are also great set play characters that we see in a lot of anime games. Batista and Alco from the French Bread games both have projectiles that only activate on button release, allowing them to freely mix up their opponents while moving around, still using other special moves and movement options.
Movement is just so good. Oh, catching backdash but no combo. Plus frames. Nice throw. What is this? What just happened? What was that?
Gotenks in DBFZ has a super where 4 ghosts appear on screen, each of them corresponding to a face button and attack on release. This made him one of the scariest characters to fight at one point because he could loop insane pressure almost indefinitely. So we've got 2 types covered, and that brings us to the last type of negative edge special move. It really doesn't fit any of the types I've mentioned yet, and funnily enough, I've only encountered this type in games made by Arc System Works. The 2 characters I think of are Zato from Guilty Gear and Carl Clover from Blaze Blue. Both characters are defined as puppet types and that they kinda control like 2 separate characters. In this case, negative edge is actually how you differentiate between the 2. For Zato, he can send out Eddie, his shadow, who remains out for a few seconds. While Eddie is out, he can perform follow-up moves depending on the buttons the player presses. This allows for unique combos and freeform pressure. If the Zato player doesn't want to immediately show their hand and do the Eddie attack that corresponds to the button they pressed, they can instead hold the button to store the move and unleash it later by releasing it. Another simplified explanation of a character, I know, but I think you get the idea. And in Carl's case, he can hold down the D button to move his puppet around, and depending on what direction you hold when you release the button, you get a corresponding move. This makes him one of the most technical characters to play in a game that's already full of technical characters. It's not like the other examples where you can just start a combo while holding a button. In this case, you need to keep track of 2 characters on the screen and adjust your combos and inputs accordingly based on what's already happening. Wild stuff.
The combo.
Very good situation.
Oh, dirty overhead.
And he will use overdrive to seal the deal.
Yeah, he needs it to keep that meter going. And this is a very Carl round right here. Carl can devastate you in one hit in the corner and just completely obliterate you just like that.
Once again, if we ask players how they would describe these inputs, there is no go-to way of doing so. Virtually nobody playing an anime game would resort to referring to these as zonks or taps because they really don't overlap in properties with those moves at all. In the case of these puppet fighters, negative edge is a way to differentiate between 2 entities while controlling them both at once. It's a genius implementation of this mechanic, considering it only existed to make inputs cleaner and more consistent. Through this exploration of negative edge, I actually ended up rekindling my love for older games that I don't play anymore, like Blaze Blue Central Fiction, and on the other hand, I was introduced to a game that truly struck me with its innovation in Garo Mark of the Wolves. I bring this up mostly to say that you should never stop exploring. I had a similar revelation in my video about charge characters, but this is a bit different because I had to go way more out of my comfort zone to see this video through. I don't care for zoning puppet characters, I don't usually play Soul Calibur, and retro games weren't really my thing until I did all this research. The world of fighting games is huge, so much bigger than most realize. There's countless ways to express yourself through combos, the types of motion inputs you gravitate towards, or even just the characters available to you. This is the reason negative edge inputs don't really fit under any kind of umbrella. A zonk is nothing like controlling a puppet. A turnaround punch shares no qualities with a move that enhances your normals. Unlike a fireball or a DP input, negative edge is made to exist literally outside the realm of motion inputs. There are means of restricting the player's physical hands and fingers in order to free their minds from the normal constraints of what's commonly possible in a fighting game. Moves like Zonk and Turnaround Punch and Super Drop Kick would break the game if they were natural inputs players could access with the touch of a button. But at the same time, players wouldn't be able to play characters like Carl Clover with interlocking movesets if it weren't for the freedom that negative edge provides as well. It exists so far outside the realm of a match that in some games you can begin holding the button from character select to add to your charge time before your opponent even has a chance to know you're doing it. If you're just getting into fighting games, I simply recommend trying more of them. They can be big time investments, but it always takes one of them to hook you. You'll never know what character or what system mechanic or soundtrack will do it, but it happens to everyone eventually. Keep exploring, keep trying new things, and keep having fun. That's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.